everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Kaya and today I'm going to be making a video about weird Italian habits, kind of giving you an explanation as to why they do certain things. I've made videos like this before in the past and they've had quite a good response from you guys, and it's really interesting seeing your feedback and hearing from you Italian folk, my Italian friends, what you guys think. And I wanted to get into just 4 things today that I found to be, I guess, a bit of a shock when I first arrived in Italy, but things that I did get used to over time. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is putting change on the counter instead of in your hand. So in Australia, for example, if you pay for something with cash and you need to get change back from it, workers will typically give you the change back in your hand. They're not going to put it on the counter. Usually it's considered a little bit rude to put it on the counter if someone's holding out their hand, for example, and you make them like pick it up off the counter. Whereas in Italy, it's not like that. So usually if you go into like a cafe or a restaurant, they'll have a dedicated cash plate, which is usually like, it's usually plastic or wooden, depending on where you go. And that's where they actually put their cash. That's where they exchange cash, which I found to be so interesting because even though they don't touch in the process of giving each other cash, they are so affectionate in other areas of their culture. So when it comes to like greeting people, they're always doing the double kiss, and with their friends, they're so affectionate. And in general, they're very like touchy-feely people. So I found that to be such an interesting contrast, especially because in Australia, it's quite the opposite. Like people might tend to be a little bit more standoffish with people that they don't really know very well, and like less affectionate in general in public situations. Whereas in Italy, I found that to be quite a contrast between how they are in the rest of, I guess, their cultural life, compared to how they are when they're exchanging money. I believe this change plate is called a piattino del resto. Piattino del resto. So difficult for me to pronounce. I can never do like the rolling R's. That's something that I never mastered and I don't think I ever will. I don't believe there to be a real reason for this necessarily. Let me know if you do know the explanation for this one, because I'd be interested to know. The second thing I found to be strange was that most households will have like a thermometer, and I found this to be so funny because it's quite an old school thing, I guess, to have in your house. I mean, I don't know many Australian households nowadays that would have a thermometer or even think to get a thermometer for their house. Like maybe when we were younger, but in Italy, it's a normal thing to have. It's something that they bring out if they have a cold or a fever. And I guess it has to do with that element of reassurance. So if they bring out the thermometer, they're not feeling well or something, they take their temperature and it's a normal temperature, then it's like that reassurance that they're not sick and they don't need to go to the doctor. But they like to know, they like to be aware of their bodies, aware of illnesses coming on, or things that they need to do to like get better quickly, before the sickness, I guess, debilitates them or compromises their day-to-day life, etc, etc. So I've talked about in the past of Italians being quite sensitive to like getting sick, and they really try and avoid it at all costs. So this extends as well into things like wearing warmer clothing when it's, I guess, warmer outside. So they'll have oftentimes scarves on or like big jackets on when it's not necessarily that cold outside, but maybe it's like the transition period in between seasons, for example. So I found that to be so interesting. And I guess I always think about as well, which is something that I've spoken about in one of my previous videos, is that they always wear shoes in the house or always wear socks in the house. And when I say shoes, I don't mean like shoes, I mean they'll always have either slippers on or socks on, or like they call them flip-flops. So they're just basically, I guess, house shoes. So as we would think of them, like slippers or Ugg boots or something like that, that you would just wear around the house. Or they might have like a pair of thongs that they just put on because they don't like to be, especially if they have tiles, they think that they might get sick from the coldness of the tiles in the wintertime. So they'll always have something on their feet. And yeah, I always think about that example that kind of ties in together with different areas of their life that they might be extra cautious or more cautious than we would be in Australia, because we kind of have the mentality of like, oh, it'll be all right, like she'll be right. We always say that kind of thing in Australia, but an interesting, I guess, contrast between the different cultures, and I guess reflecting on my own conditioning, as my own stance on these things. I really found it interesting to reflect on my experience versus this new experience that I was seeing right in front of me. So yeah, I found that to be so interesting. The last thing that I'm going to talk about is cutting lines, or the absence of lines altogether. Now in Italy, it seems to be a common thing to say, if you go out, it can be anywhere, if you go out to like a bar, or if you're lining up for like, I don't know, whatever it is you're lining up for, Italians tend to be quite pushy, quite assertive, because that's just kind of the way things work. So if you're, for example, in a bar, in a cafe or a restaurant or something, and you order a coffee, they often have like a few different stations, so a few different ordering system things. So basically what happens is you go up to the main counter, and that's where you order your coffee or your croissant, and they give you a ticket. And then what you have to do is that you have to take that ticket and then go over to where they actually make the coffee, and somehow squeeze your way in this, like, what they would call, I don't even know what they'd call it, but it's definitely not a line. It's definitely an absence of lines in most bars and cafes. But you have to take your ticket up to the barista and tell them what you ordered, and then they'll start making it for you. So there's not really like a system in the sense that that if you order first, for example, you're going to get served first, because it really depends on how quick you are. I guess it kind of works on a first in, best dressed basis. So if you're, even if you order after someone else or after the person in front of you, but you manage to get your ticket in first, then you're gonna get your coffee first. So there's kind of like an absence of lines in a lot of different situations. And I found that to be so strange and a little bit difficult to get used to, because I'm usually not one to be that pushy, or at least that's not really how it works in Australia. So it took me a while to get used to that. They're just a few things that I thought would be interesting for some of you guys. If you've never been to Italy before, or you're thinking of going to Italy, or even if you're not going to Italy but you're just interested in different cultural differences and things like that, there are a few things that I definitely noticed were differences when I went to Italy. So that's where I'm going to end this video here today, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. Give it a thumbs up if you did, and make sure to subscribe for new videos every week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!